Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again on our journey of getting to know our NSP a little bit better. It has been a very long, but I think worthwhile and fruitful journey that we've traveled along every week. It's been 12 weeks, 12 weeks of really getting a detailed understanding of how the NSP works. We've covered quite a lot. We've covered each of the pillars of the NSP. We've covered additional processes, such as how laws are passed in our country, getting to understand the legislative framework, the establishment of the National Council. Please excuse while a plane flies over where I am. So just give me a second. Apologies. This is the nature of technology and working from home. We have all of the noises and sounds in our vicinity that accompany us as we have these conversations. So thanks for your patience there. The plane is now flown over. Hopefully it will land somewhere. As I continue back in our introduction, I realized I got ahead of myself. My name is Mbandazayo. And I work at Action Aid South Africa, and I'm here representing the Call to Action as well. I will be the moderator for today's conversation. And I'm really excited about today's conversation, and I'm sure you are as well, especially it being the very last of the 12-week conversation. We're definitely hoping that by the time we're done with this conversation, we have maybe learned a bit more, understood a bit more, and able to answer some of our questions that we had from last week, some of the red flag issues that we had touched on. So as I was saying before the plane flew over, we've discussed a lot these last 12 weeks. We really have. We've gone really into depth looking at and trying to understand and get a better grip on the document that was launched in April and that was given to us. We took time to really learn about the different pillars of this National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, the NSP GBVF. We wanted to understand how a law is made so we can understand the processes. We wanted to understand how does a fund get developed so that we better understand the process around developing a fund for the NSP and for the work on gender-based violence and femicide. We wanted to understand the different mechanisms that exist so that when those decisions are made, we're also very informed around what those look like and how they would work. And then, of course, we started this whole conversation off by reminding ourselves how we got to the point of actually having this document in front of us. We spoke a bit about the marches that happened previously on the 8th of August. We talked about the Gender Summit. We just talked about all of those processes that involved us and how and why this NSP is so important to us and why it also belongs to us. So that was, I think, a really helpful journey for many of us, and I speak for myself when I say that I learned a lot just going week by week. And thank you so much for all the engagement that we got from everyone who is listening to us from all the different platforms. And just to mention again that it hasn't been easy given that we've had to do all of this remotely. We've had to do all of this from screens and computers and not in the normal way that we are used to engaging in as civil society, in a face-to-face, touch my blood, touch your blood kind of way. But hopefully we can soon get back to that way of working. So today's conversation really brings together our process as civil society as we've come to understand the NSP. But secondly, we've also invited government to join us in this conversation because I think we believe that this is actually a partnership. And in terms of that being a partnership, we need to bring on board the other partner. So we've taken time to understand the document, to understand how it works, to raise certain considerations and concerns, but also to gain appreciation for the document as it's in front of us. And so this conversation more broadly is an opportunity for us to discuss and to share what would a co-created process look like of walking out the NSP into a reality. And what we are hoping will come out of this conversation is a joint understanding and appreciation, both from obviously ourselves, civil society, around what do we find has been valuable within the process and within the NSP, but also what have we noted as concerns, what we call red flags that we can share, and then also for us to hear as civil society what are some of the concerns that government may have or has had working with civil society, or concerns that they have going into this process. Where do they see opportunities for us to work better together? I think that both civil society and government, we've had lots of opportunities of working together. And I think based on that, we are wanting to say, how do we do this better? How do we do it in such a way that we meet each other along the way? One, it remains owned by civil society as well as government, but then the implementation reflects both of those sides. And so that is the basis of today's conversation. And I'm hoping that the same way that you've been contributing and you've been really engaging in the different weeks, you'll continue to do so. Just a reminder that all of our platforms are live and are available. So we're on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and then also some people are joining us from the online platform, the webinar platform as well. Please share your questions, please share your comments. We're hoping for as much engagement as possible, because even though we do have our representative from civil society, there are always more questions than she possibly has, or more thoughts than she can hold. And so we're inviting everyone just to share your comments and your questions as we engage and really have a co-creative conversation with our government representatives today. And so, yeah, I think that said, I have with us today representing the Department of Women, Youth, Persons with Disabilities Advocate, Joyce Maluleke. Thank you so much for joining us today, Advocate. And then for civil society, I do have Kwezilomso Mbandazayo, who's going to be joining us as well. I'm going to ask both of them just to start off by telling us a little bit about themselves. And then once we've had got to know them a little bit more, we'll go straight into our conversation for today. Just one final pointer to make. As per our custom, about halfway through our conversation, we will have the poll going back up again. Just a reminder, please let us know, can you hear us? Are you following the conversation? Any challenges, so that we can immediately fix that even while we're having the conversation. And then secondly to that, just a note to say that really today we're hoping to focus on questions that help us to build the co-creating of this process going forward that are related to the NSP. So we're going to prioritize those questions and comments for today, just so that we cover what we hope and aim to cover. And then hopefully at the end of the discussion, we will open up for questions and comments. And if time allows, we will ask some of you who are joining us to unmute yourselves and share your questions. If they don't, if time does not allow, please do share them, and we will share as many questions as possible as we can. All right, I think that's all from my side. I'm going to hand over to Advocate Joyce. Advocate Sis Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. And please, can you just do a short introduction just to tell us a little bit about who you are and yeah, just a little bit about who you are. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon to all the listeners. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to Kwezi. I know that officials from my department have joined, also the special advisor. Mabatura Mahoshi has joined, UN Women, all of them. I greet them, everyone who's participating here. And I just want to say thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to come and talk to you now as this group. However, I have been talking to civil society for a long time. I have achieved a lot during the time when I was in government before, through my work with civil society. So I have a strong relationship. Those that are coming in now may not know me, but those that have been there for some time, they know me. When you say Joyce Maluleke, they will know. I have had a good working relationship with civil society all the way. And I hope being in the Department of Women is not going to change that. We'll still have a good working relationship. It doesn't mean that when we have to fight, we will not fight. We will fight, but at the end of the day, we have a common cause that we have to go after and we have to defeat. We don't have to defeat each other. We have to defeat the common cause that brings us together. In terms of who I am, I've been involved in this gender justice business for nearly 30 years, for 3 decades. I have contributed a lot in the justice system in terms of ensuring that women's rights, but also issues of domestic violence are addressed. I've worked with the consortium on gender-based violence, the consortium on the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act when it came into operation in 2000. I think it was in 2000. There was a consortium of civil society with NGOs and universities and all those. I've worked with them. That's where I know Sibongile Ndashe also when she was still in the Women Legal Center. And we developed, and you will be pleased to know that the magistrates are using it even now. We developed the guidelines on the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act for the magistrates together with them. And from that process, the magistrates developed the guidelines on the implementation of the Maintenance Act, having learned from what we've done from me as a gender focal person in the Department of Justice and civil society. So I do have a relationship and I respect civil society, and I know that they have expertise. They have other expertise that I don't have. I may have other expertise, and together we can do more. So just for now, let me say this. I don't want to take lots of time because also at some point I'm going to run away and I'll leave Shoki and Esther because I have another meeting that is coming after. But I'm looking forward to discussions. And let me promise you, I'm going to be honest. I'm one person. I'm honest. If it's yes, I'm going to tell you yes. If it's no, I'll say no, I'm sorry. But I believe that from here, we will all know where we are going to, and I will know the concerns, because some of the decisions that we might have taken might be because I didn't have all the information from civil society side. So that's why I'm looking forward to this conversation so that we can be able to build a stronger relationship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister. I think we're really excited to have you in the Department of Women and look forward to that, like you said, a very strong and honest relationship that you've had with civil society over the years. So we're really excited that you're joining us for this conversation. I'm going to hand over to Kwezi now for Kwezi to do a quick intro about herself as well, just before we take off on the conversation. Thank you so much, Kwezi.
Right, thanks, Lynn, and thank you, Joyce. I have been having some, and this sounds like my story, I've been having some technical issues, needing to change devices and everything, so my video is going to be on and off. I apologize in advance. So, as you both know, my name is Kwezilomso. My name's Kwezilomso Mbandazayo. I am people's daughter, people's friend, people's sister. I'm from a very big town in the Eastern Cape called Butterworth. And I work in various areas and spaces, right, to try and form part of the collective solution to our problems. And so I'm here today as one of those voices. I absolutely do not purport to speak for my colleagues and comrades and sisters and friends, but I'm here as one of the voices. And I really appreciate Joyce in your introduction. The fact also that, you know, as civil society as well, we have nuanced relationships with engaging the state. So the times when we're going to march into your office and we're going to occupy it until you do something, and the times when we're going to sit down and have a good conversation, right? And that's just all part of the effort. And now we're in the space where we're saying we have been having many conversations around the NSP, and we want to kind of try and bring to you some questions, some discussions, some red flags that we are listening to and we are seeing and we're hearing. So that's me. I'm currently with OXFAM South Africa and the Call to Action Collective and many other collectives that work to try and create better communities, better societies, try to understand, try to act. Yeah, that's me. I'll stop there.
Lindelo, before you come in, I just want to say to Kwezi, you are late. You are not going to sit in my office because I'll be on virtual, so you have to sit in a virtual. But I would have said, I would love you to go and sit. I would love you to go and sit in the National Treasury office until they give us a budget. But also, it might not work because they'll continue doing what they're doing virtually. No, that's what I wanted to say.
We will find a way.
One day when Corona is gone, we'll go back to our ways. But at least today it's one of those conversation days. So not a day for occupation yet. Thanks so much, Kwezi, for that. I think maybe I'll start with you, Kwezi. And if you could just give us just a little bit of maybe context around today's conversation from, I guess, I'm saying from a collective's perspective, but obviously noting that, there's so many different people, so many organizations, so many thoughts, so many people who've been involved in all of these conversations. So I'm saying that, in quotes, from what would be the civil society perspective, a background about the context of where we are now, and why today is so important.
So, I think, Lynn, you mentioned some of the important issues even in your introduction. So, we got the NSP passed in April, an NSP that took almost a decade to get through. So there's been kind of loads of there's been quite a lot of struggle to try and get this kind of strategic framework that will coalesce all sectors in society in a strategic and visionary way around gendered violence, right? So after much of that, we noted, even in the webinar series, we kind of made mention of the total shutdown marches of 2018, the gender summit, and the processes that flowed from that. We then have this document. And so from our side, what then we have done with that is to say, okay, so let's have a look at this document and see what does it say? Who does it give authority to do what? What does it lay out as the key strategic pillars? What does it say how the NSP ought to be implemented? What does it say about how the NSP ought to be funded? What does it say? So we then went through this process, which is what we've been doing over 12 weeks, of teaching each other about the National Strategic Plan, and really trying to get into the detail of what is contained in that document, trying to appraise the document as well. As any policy document, it's not a perfect document, but it has things that are really strong in it, and that's what we've been doing. But particularly as the Call to Action Collective, we've been really interested in the implementation modalities that are set out in Chapter 5 of the National Strategic Plan. So we've been very interested in the setting up, I guess, of the house that is to hold the implementation of this document or of the strategy. And that house makes way for a couple of things. It makes way for a legislative framework that will then govern how a council of the NSP to be formed. It talks to the setting up of the GBV fund. So just in particular with those three things, because we do believe that it's really important to get the modalities right? part of the big critique around how we have done gender-based violence work in the country in the past is lack of coherence. And a lot of the coherence is kind of about making sure that departments, municipalities, civil society, committees all know what they have to do and what they should be doing. And it's all funded from a place, we all know where that money is coming from, etc. So that is the process we have been doing, right? Is kind of popularizing the sense that we've got an NSP. This is what the NSP says. These are the institutional arrangements of the NSP. And from those conversations and from our reading and from our engagement, even with the Department of Women, we've raised some of the issues in relation to that. But also to mention that we were invited to a webinar on sometime in early June with the minister. And we had written to the minister prior to the webinar because we had gotten a request to input into the terms of reference for the setting up of the council. We got a response from the minister last week acknowledging our letter, sending us the minutes and proposing a couple of terms of reference again for the setting up of the council. And for us, that's also a point of conversation, right? But for me, let me leave the background there and maybe ask Joyce to give us a sense of what, from your guys' side, right? Like, what have you been doing as it relates to the NSP since we got it in April?
Okay. Thank you, Kwezi. First of all, I just want to thank you and civil society, everyone involved, Bongile, and everyone who's been involved in the consultations. The work that you've done of consulting, of making sure that all members of the civil society know and understand the NSP and know and understand what the role of government is and the role of civil society. It's something that as government would not have been able to do. So I would like to thank you and to commend you for that, because us being able to address or being able to conquer this scourge, we need exactly what you've been saying, that everyone needs to know, everyone needs to understand, everyone needs to be able to say, I know I'm supposed to be here, so that somebody can be there. And all of us, if we're standing where we're supposed to stand, then we'll at least we'll get something. We will at least eradicate the violence. So I just want to congratulate you for that, for having played that part. And then the thing that I know that civil society wants to know most is the one on the council, on the National Council on Gender-Based Violence. All I can say is that from April, when the NSP was launched, to now, so many things have been happening. But I think the first one is where, because the NSP provided that the council should be a legislated a body, should be a statutory body. I think that's where maybe the department had challenges, because they felt that they couldn't move until legislation is there. Until civil society said to the department, go ahead, come up, establish a board and the secretariat. Meanwhile, the issue of legislation is being pursued. But besides that, also on the 10th of December 2019, Cabinet also made the same decision, where Cabinet said, because legislation will take a long process. At the end of the day, it's not government, it's not the ministers, it's not even the president who decides whether legislation should be developed or not. It's parliament, because parliament is the legislator. We can decide that legislation, we should legislate, but at the end of the day, they can come back and say, yes, we agree, or we do not agree. So then Cabinet said, because implementing the NSP is urgent, that was the reason behind, where they said, because it's urgent, In the meantime, meanwhile, we're pursuing legislative measures and processes. Establish a model similar to SANEC, so that the NSP is being implemented, because the purpose was to ensure that the NSP doesn't wait until when the legislation is developed. So then what we have done, because we then had a meeting with SANEC, with the Secretariat of SANEC, to understand how it has been established and all those, but also Shoki and Esther had already informed me, because don't forget, I'm here for a month now. I'll be 2 months at the end of this year as a DG. At the end of this month, I mean to say, they informed me that actually civil society didn't want the SANEC format, because SANEC is complicated and all those things. However, based on the decision of the cabinet, when I saw the cabinet decision, then I thought, let us, in the meantime, establish or register a trust that would host the board that is required. Because when you look at page, based on, I've got the NSP document here, and what we are doing, I think it's page 60. Page 60, under page 60, Shoki's participating here. I don't know if she can flight the structure. However, there's this structure. I hope people can see it. There's this structure on the NSP, page 60 of the NSP, which provides a model where there's IMC, and then there's legislation, parliament, and then it has an executive board with 13 members, 51% civil society, 49% government, and then it shows provincial, and then it shows a local government. So in order for us to be able to establish in the meanwhile, the legislative processes are on the way, we had to register a trust, because as a department, I cannot establish a board just hanging from the department, or a secretariat hanging from the department. It needs some legal basis. So a trust is some form of a legal basis to be able to establish a board within that trust and the secretariat. So we have already submitted, we've lodged the trust deed with the master's office. Currently, I just gave them 3 names so that the trust is being established, is registered. Meanwhile, the process of electing 7 members from civil society who will be in the board will roll out. So as soon as the 7 members who represent civil society have been elected, then the trust deed will be amended to include those. Even with government, we've not yet, because we're saying the members that would, government officials that will be in the trust should not necessarily be those that are now in the technical trust team. So we've written to the ministers to give us 6 names of people who will be in the board, because also the board will require people who can be able to respond, who understand issues of governance and all those things. So the process of the trust is so that the gender-based violence board that is required as per the NSP could be housed there, but also so that a secretariat, because the board now will advertise, will establish a secretariat, it will advertise for a CEO and certain structures. Also what we've done, so that we can be able to ensure a broader participation of civil society, because civil society have been complaining that 7 that has been included in the NSP is not broadly representative. So they feel that some of them will not be able to participate, even though, yes, not each and every civil society will be able to participate even in the plenary. But we thought we should, in the meanwhile legislation is being developed, we should follow the issue of SANEC, where we have the board and the secretariat, but also we have a plenary where civil society can choose. We had looked at civil society organizations. I think they're about, with SANEC, they have 18, but when we looked at them, we ended up with 14 because we felt that we are not going to focus on, SANEC has a sector of HIV-infected persons. So even though it's an issue, it's a critical issue, but that is an issue in SANEC. So those are some of the sectors that we've removed, and then we ended up with about 14 sectors. So the process, the webinar that was requested by the minister, the purpose was to come and present to civil society that ever since the last time the IMC has been established, there's an IMC which has got 6 ministers. However, looking at the fact that implementation of the NSP will depend mostly on municipalities, on local government. We would like to recommend, we requested the minister that the minister must write to cabinet and also to the president to request that the IMC be extended to include Minister of COGTA, because we will definitely need their cooperation in order to ensure that all these structures that we're talking about, or the committees, are represented in the municipalities. So I've met with National Treasury. That's where I want Kwezi to assist also. We've met with the National Treasury to look at funding. Our initial meeting, they told us government can't, National Treasury can't fund the trust. Then we went back to SANEC to request, to inquire from SANEC that, SANEC, who funds you? And then they said, no, our programs and the board are not funded by government, but the secretariat is funded by government. So we called a meeting where we called National Treasury and we called SANEC and sat down with them and said to SANEC, SANEC, can you please present and show us what funding you get from government? And they presented, and we realized that government is funding them, even though National Treasury was saying they're not funding them. So now the process that I am engaged in now is engaging with National Treasury to say, how much are you going to give us? At least you must match what you're giving SANEC. I think the challenge that we have is that gender issues are not taken serious sometimes. Yes, the president talks about gender issues, whatever, but when you go down to the practical or to your department level, they will continue doing their thing. So the National Treasury is the one that might be a stumbling block to us being able to establish or to fund or to appoint the CEO and establish the secretariat. However, now this is where we are, and I am hoping that by end of this month, the board, the trust will have been signed, and then we can initiate the process of a nomination, where we'll advertise for nomination of civil society members that will participate in the board as provided for in the NSP. And the issue of legislation, why we insisted that we need to have a plenary like SANEC, because if we have a board and a secretariat only, I am not sure how would they be able to keep on agitating until the legislation is established. However, if we have a plenary, because in a plenary also, it will assist us, because even though the NSP refers to the IMC with 6 ministers, the implementation of the NSP, as we all know that it has got 6 pillars, it covers the entire government, economic sector, and all the others. So in a plenary, that's where we'll be able to have all other ministers over and above the 6 ministers and more sectors of the civil society organization. I think for now, let me pause here, ask me questions if you want to ask me questions. Yeah, question.
All right, let me thank you, Alfred, in here. So I think part of the point we have been trying to raise has been that, so after the department was present in the consultations and in the writing of the National Strategic Plan, right? So we were well aware, all of us, that the council, I'm using these words all interchangeably, but all of these things have to be legislated. And we were all aware, and this is a point we made even in the last webinar, we were all aware that legislation takes time. So I think for me, one of the questions becomes, what is the process that is happening in terms of the legislative framework, and how is that being done? So like, what's the implementation plan for the legislative framework? Because it feels to me and to a couple of us that we are trying to kind of arrange how the NSP envisions itself as to be implemented, right? Gender-based violence in the country has been a crisis for the last, at least for the last like 25 years, when we've had what is quote unquote a legitimate state. So the kind of the rush to establish a council is concerning for us, especially because even with, so it's like there's a design that's envisaged, this house that I was talking about, and this house kind of has different places. You know, you're talking also about resources. This house also includes the building of the GBVF fund and the establishment of the fund. And we need to kind of thresh out what that fund should look like and who should be accountable to, etc. That the council gets its powers and its terms and all of that from legislation, from law, to allow for it to move in particular ways. And I think in the authoring of that, it was because of, you know, there were reasons why the legislative framework was put in place as a way to proceed the setting up of some of these things. So that's the one concern. It is why do we want so badly to switch up how the thing is said to be envisaged, when we were all, like, representatives were there in drafting the initial document, knowing that legislation takes years, and knowing that government, civil society, private sector already has this GBV work that's ongoing. But as it relates to implementing this national strategic plan that we know we worked so hard for, why do we want to flip, right? And try and set up a board of, like, a trust, you know, yeah. So that's the kind of first set of big concern and question for me. And second, when we move to the terms of reference, I also would like to understand the logic of a kind of setting out terms for civil society, whilst there are no terms and eligibility criteria for government officials. Because, you know, if we were at the table, if I was at the table, if someone else was at the table, I know that there's a couple of things we would want as well from the people who are from the state side who sit on that council. Like, it wouldn't be nice to have people who are perpetrators of violence sitting on the council. It would not be nice to have a council that's mostly men, right? There's lots of eligibility criteria that should even bind government and state officials as sitting on the council. And in both sets of terms of reference, what we're seeing is a nomination process for civil society and criteria set for civil society, without the same for government. And there's kind of, there's no clarity again about how, you know, the terms of reference doesn't give us the clearest sense of what are these people going to do when they then sit on the council, right? And again, this is one of the things that makes us say, again, please, can we slow down and take time to design and build the house of the NSP? Because then there's no doubt that there's many people, both in civil society and government, who are more than qualified to be able to sit on something like that. But if it's not very clear what the job description is this a full-time paid position? Is this employment? How do we ensure that we really do get candidates that meet what this council is being set up to do, which should come from its law and which should come from the NSP? How do we really make sure that there is kind of robust communication? This, to me, is building the NSP house. Sounds like work that needs to stretch a while, and it sounds like work that needs to be invested in, because if we don't catch it at how we're implementing it, if we do not legislate for some of the ways in which we should fund the NSP, then we get into a couple of other problems. So I think these, when I asked Joyce, have been some of the issues for us that have been coming up consistently, which is, you know, in trying to take on work on the NSP, it seems like we are prioritizing the setting up of the council as opposed to prioritizing, you know, the process to design all of these things so that we can all be involved. As I said, you know, I know that from the Call to Action Collective, we are really interested and would really want to be involved in designing the house, slowly, carefully, in designing, you know, what should be in the legislative framework. And we spoke about this with the webinars, in designing the fund, in designing, you know, terms of reference, ways of accountability for the council. So that's the offer for us, which say we want to create with you, but we also trying to understand the shifting of the prioritizing of how we implement, because building the house, which is a metaphor I'm overusing, is part of implementing the NPV, right? It's not doing work on GBV to be quite concise, and it's not making it urgent. I think is the point I'm trying to make. It's part of how we are responding to GBV is by building mechanisms that can adequately respond to GBV. Let me maybe stop there.
Okay, thank you, Kwezi. I think the challenge with dealing with civil society is that civil society doesn't speak in one voice. And that's the challenge that we have now. There's others that are saying, why are you waiting? And the department says, no, we received a request that we shouldn't go ahead and wait for 3 months and so that their consultation. Others say, no, we said to you, implement in the meantime. Meanwhile, the process of legislation is being rolled out. So I think that is the challenge that we have. But also, I would like you to go back to page 60, the one that I showed here, that page 60 of the NSP talks to the board. So it's unlike the department has just woke up one day and wanted to establish a board. It talks to the board. It talks to the secretariat that we must establish a board and a secretariat. And because we are expected in the meantime to implement, also the president requires the minister to submit weekly reports, which are signed both by civil society and the minister, in order in reporting on the implementation of the NSP. However, currently, because the whole thing is not coordinated, is on a voluntary basis, and you know it makes it very difficult. So meanwhile, the process of legislating the council roll out. We want at least to have something that brings together, that legally coordinates and brings together civil society and government to be able to implement the NSP. You spoke about the National Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Fund. Currently in the trust, we are looking at a standalone within that secretariat, which would then work on facilitating the gender-based violence, gender-based violence and femicide funding, raising funds and all those things. However, we cannot establish that thing from within the department. It somehow it needs to be coordinated, where civil society also will be participating. Civil society will be 51, 49 there. So civil society will be able to guide to say, we think we shouldn't do it this way, or the money that they've been raised, this is how that money needs to be distributed. So the trust, because I'm just saying, legislation takes long. It could take even 3 years. Once we're going to parliament, people coming, people saying, because already I think also that people who are opposing that, look here, already there's this institution, others saying, no, we are a government department. So all those things are going to delay. So in the meanwhile, we are fighting that war. What should happen? Because we can't continue working in this way. Now people are volunteering with the pillars. Civil society is convening out there and whatever. The trust and the secretariat and the plenary will assist us, all of us, to be able to call the ministers, because at the plenary there will be ministers, there will be a sector, civil society sector representation, who will then say to the ministers, we think this is what needs to happen. We're still waiting for legislation. Why is legislation delaying and all those things? That will give us a coordinated and structured way to fight for this thing. Government, like for example, the department is not trying to hide anything. And the department, whether it legislates or not, at the end of the day, it's government departments, your justice, your social development, NPA, and all those that provide services. But if we have this structure that is a legal structure that would then coordinate, it makes it even simpler, because then it won't be justice saying, no, we think we have a budget or we don't have a budget. The process, the council will also be able to cost. I know that there was a costing that has been done whenever of 9 billion. That's the other area that I want to talk about. I think all of us know that we saw in the newspapers where the statistician general was saying our fiscus has fallen, has collapsed by 50.9%. So it will impact even maybe the budget that we get, because as government we're already impacted. But the process of registering the trust is so that the board, because here in the NSP, we are supposed to establish a board. Yes, I understand you wanted it to be through legislation, but we are not sure how long it's going to take. Maybe as this formation, you feel it's okay, we can go ahead and fight the issue of legislation, even if it takes 2 years or 3 years, it's okay. But other civil society organizations are saying, no, you can't wait for that long. At least establish something. So this is a temporary measure. We are not diverting from the NSP, but we're saying, meanwhile, we follow that process in order for the NSP to be implemented, in order for us to be able to raise funds, because the trust can be able to raise funds. But also the raising of the funds of the trust will assist us all also to be able to now properly cost the implementation. Unlike now, where somebody will come and say, it's thumbsuck and all those, because I've already been told that, no, here you thumbsucked, how did you get to this budget? However, if we, in the meantime, work through this trust, which has a board as required or requested by civil society, of 51 civil society members and 49 government, and then a secretariat. The secretariat will also have 6 directors who will be focusing on each pillar. because also now there are complaints that in some of the pillar meetings, government is not coordinating, a government is not coming in and whatever. That process will facilitate, because there will be a person who, when they wake up, their job is to ensure that government and civil society are working together. There will be people who are ensuring that we're raising funds, we're going here and there to get funds in order for the NSP to continue being implemented. Meanwhile, the issue of legislation is being debated, or the process is being rolled out. I think for now, yeah, this is what, yeah, and you referred to the terms of reference, that terms of reference are drafted for civil society organizations, and there are no terms of reference for government. I think maybe what made it easier for government is that the NSP itself already dictates that there should be 6 departments, and it already dictates which departments are involved. And those departments, it's mostly people, in fact, all of them is those people who deal with the sketch. However, with civil society, we can't just go out there and choose the next 7 members who will represent civil society, because as indicated earlier on, that civil society doesn't speak in one voice, and civil society is very broad. So this process would allow all, not others accusing others that we are not involved in that group or whatever. So all civil society will be involved in the process of nominating. And the other thing that I know civil society is interested in is who's going to select, you know, because they might not trust us. They'll think we are going we might choose people that we think are sweetheart civil societies to government. And no, that's not the process that we're going to follow. Or more especially for me, because I've already told you, I don't care how vicious you can be, but with me, you work with me whether you like it or not. So all of you, at the end of the day, you will work with me. So we will be advertising also. Pardon? We will be advertising.
No, I was going to say.
Pardon?
Sorry to break you, but in terms of the terms of reference, yes, the ones for civil society refer to eligibility criteria. There's also, like, I picked up something strange there around people's mental wellness and we need we need that to go, number one, but B, we also need the same kind of rigor of who sits on that council. We can't trust that, you know, the government employees, well, now you guys can select yourselves and you're going to give us the best people for the job and those with experience there's no, we don't have a nice long relationship of trust that the state, we think, will take care of us in that way. So just on that point, I think it's important that if we are being really specific and particular about who gets to sit, we can all influence those terms of reference, and B, you know, they must appeal, they must they need to be for everybody. But I mean, you know, my position on the council, for example, I do think that the things are premature. Maybe let me let you finish your point so that I can then jump in, and maybe Lynn will open to the floor.
Okay. I think in terms of the terms of reference, unless they have changed, maybe you've been given the ones earlier on which refer to wellness and mental health and all those things. I haven't seen that, because the ones that I've seen now are focusing on making sure that all groups are represented, persons with disabilities, LGBTQIA+, you know, all those, they're referring to that, and also all sectors within the civil society organizations. But I'll look into them also. Now that you've raised it, Kwesi, I'll go back and look at them to ensure that they are not demeaning to other people. And then I was saying earlier on, we have advertised so that there's a company, though we were looking at an HR company that would facilitate the shortlisting and whatever, independent, that based on the criteria that has been advertised. So as a result, at the end of the day, the department is not going to be involved in the shortlisting and all those. And then the minister is the one who will then do the final recommendations for the IMC. But from what we are saying now, I think Mabatu is also here. We will discuss it with Mabatu that maybe before the minister sends it to IMC, minister can still maybe report to civil society to say these are the CVs that we've received, and then there was a company that shortlisted whatever, and either they recommended 333, and based on 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I chose 111 or that process. It's something that we can still discuss. But yeah, we are not going to be involved in, even the CVs are not going to come to us. They will go directly to that company that will have been appointed. And again, I understand, and what you're saying, I understand that you feel that we are rushing this. However, we also know that legislation might take longer than whatever. And if legislation is not forthcoming within the next 2 years or 3 years, what are we going to do? Are we still having to wait, or can we, in the meantime, implement? So that is the spirit that we're coming here with. We are not saying we're ignoring the NSP. We're not ignoring what civil society is saying, but we're saying we're trying to come up with a structure that would help us, that something that is legal, that will help us to coordinate appropriately. There were complaints in another meeting that there are so many meetings, civil society is convening there are pillar meetings, there are bigger meetings and whatever, there are so many things. And others were saying, no, please, can you rationalize things and whatever? And I believe that the board and secretariat and the plenary that would have all civil society, like all sectors of civil society and government departments, can be able to rationalize. In the meanwhile, we're looking at legislation. That is the approach and attitude that we're coming with, not that we are pulling back or we're disregarding what is being said.
So
yes.
I don't know, maybe maybe the other comrades have other stuff to add, but I know that I'm not convinced about the process as it is, because as I said, I think that the building of the house is such an important is part of implementing the NSP. I hear you, Alstress, and I was waiting for that civil society doesn't speak in one voice. But funny enough, cannot but even in how you are describing some of the kind of challenges, neither does government, right? So this is we all need to try and coalesce in better ways. And part of this conversation actually was to ask you to, maybe even if it's at the end, to reflect on what are some of the ways that, particularly the Call to Action Collective and civil society more broadly, what are some of the things that are frustrating about how we engage that we can, try and reflect on our side? Because we're not coming at this also thinking, Uba, Tina, we do everything properly, we are transparent, we are this, we are that. We are also coming into this as reflective, activists. So it would be nice to hear from you, Uba. It would be really helpful if, and not some of these generic, we can't speak in one voice, Alstress. You've been there. We are different people, different interests, different starting points, different political ideologies. In one voice, and so the need for man. Yeah, he kind of one hymn book. Maybe we can strive for, right? So, or like one building. we can try for. So it would be nice to hear you reflecting a little bit on that. But I wanted to also say that I guess as a way to meet each other somewhere, us as Call to Action are really interested in some of the details, right? We want to know the details and to be actively involved in influencing some of these details. So we want to be part of, really would like to have a broad implementation plan of the NSP that includes building the institutional arrangement. And we would like for the state to give up its communication plan and tell us that, you know, we are live on the website, we will communicate via this WhatsApp line, we will communicate via Facebook and this and that about these. But so we want an insight into, because sometimes, and even this conversation is not enough for us to get an insight into the rationale for changing things or for doing things in particular ways. And it's unfortunate that sometimes we feel like we are in a culture where sometimes government doesn't feel like they owe you an explanation. Yabo, nifune NSP, nansi NSP, and we're going about our business. But, you know, for me, building consensus and building relationshiping is also about bringing me into your thinking process, and saying as much as possible, communicating reasons and factors and, you know, the ways in which different things come together to make you make particular decisions. And the third thing I was going to say is, you know, and maybe again, this is one of the ways forward that I want to propose as we move forward. I said forward twice. One of the things I'd like to propose is conveners. You are a government department. You have, I hope, a bigger database than all of us combined of who are these people who are not speaking in Gosiam. Who are these people? You have a sense of the different voices, like many voices that are not one. Convene the many voices and say, here's the key. This is what it says. This is what we say. This camp says implement now. This camp says slowly, steadily, as Kulumeni song. Again, I know that, and if I'm not speaking for my colleagues, Lana Askisini, but the Call to Action Collective would greatly welcome being part of something like that, because we are really, we want to defend the integrity of this process as much as possible. And for us, we need to try as much as possible to do things in the way in which we had said we had committed to each other that we would do them. So if there's these big discrepancies, I want to suggest that, you know, instead of the department that's kind of steaming ahead, that there be a couple more conversations of convening the various voices that are not one, where we can then say, okay, so these are the competing views, and this is why this side is winning at the moment. So those are some of my things as it relates, and so we can raise some of these red flags, because for us, raising these red flags is also acting in the sense that, you know, civil society doesn't engage meaningfully. Civil society doesn't kind of look at the technical aspects of things. Those are the things we want, as well as the doing, as well as the abstract. We want it everywhere, yeah. And so there isn't a process, and I think the state sits in a position where we can say, you know, you can say, okay, we are convening a mass meeting of women's rights-based and feminist organizations and movements to say we have an NSP, how do we implement it? And this is what we've done so far, and this is how we've gone. Sabu Gender Summit. So, and the people who are wanting reports, we report on that because this is part of implementing. So I really want to push back against the sense that there's implementing the content and then there's building the house. Building the house is implementation. And all of these things must weigh equal value. Askis Lena, I think you wanted to say something. That's let me.
No, thanks so much, Kwezi, and Joyce. I think that you both are raising, interesting and relevant points. I think what I'm understanding from what Joyce is saying is that the government is in the process of implementing some sort of process regarding this as we wait. And I think what Kwezi is saying is, how do we find each other in that process? How do we find clarity around what that process looks like? And how do we become engaged and involved in that process in a way that makes sense within the plethora of voices that is civil society, right? And I think those are really important pointers. So for instance, the idea that you are just establishing a board, or you're just establishing a board outside of a process, because to us it seems like it's outside of a process because you haven't shaped that process, and allowing us to engage with that process in a way that we are able to actually account for the long goal that we all have, I think is really, really important. But I wanted to invite other voices into the conversation. While I allow Sister to sort of respond to Kwezi, I wanted to say, once you are done sort of responding to Kwezi's input, to invite other people who have some questions. There's a couple of hands up, I'm told, so that we can also get in other people who have perhaps a different perspective or other comments that they want to bring into this conversation. And so that we broaden and make the circle bigger. So can I ask you to then just share with us, based on what Kwezi shared around the red flags coming out from this collective and some of the concerns we have around the different ways in which we're understanding what the process could look like, and also understanding even more broadly the fuller implementation plan that you are already engaged in, which includes the pillars, the establishment of those pillars, includes the, as you just shared, the establishment of a board and the registering of the trust, etc., etc.
Okay. As indicated, that the only difference here is the fact that the board and the secretariat for now will be housed by a trust, which is a legal a vehicle, because there's no legislation currently, and legislation might not be there even up to next year or whenever, because legislation takes its own process. Government departments and whatever, before it even goes to consultation, would have taken their time or would have objected to that process of legislation. So there's no diversion. The only difference is the housing of that board, but also as indicated that I have been informed to advertise. Government is not advertising the CEO. Government is not establishing the board. We can't establish the board outside just like that. And also the board is so that it can raise the fund that Kwezi has been talking about, that we need to establish a fund, but also for civil society to be able to continue implementing the NSP, but also to be able to agitate government to continue with legislation. A certain fund is required. So the board, that will be the function of the board which will consist of 51 as provided for in the NSP, 51% civil society organization and 49% government departments. And the other thing that I forgot to say earlier on is that the advert for the nomination of the board members will be out this weekend, I think Saturday and Sunday, in the newspaper. So I request that civil society nominate people who participate, and I think it gives them an opportunity to nominate people who, even when they're in the board, they'll continue agitating for civil society, continue pushing for the objectives that have been agreed to beforehand. Because if they don't nominate, somebody else will nominate, and wrong people will end up in the board. But also, Kwezi said something which is very important: convening civil society, so that civil society can speak in one voice. The department used to have the National Gender Machinery meetings. However, those meetings somehow collapsed in some of the, I think in the 5th administration or 4th administration. However, this is one of the things that, as a Director General, now that I came into the department, that I'm reviving. Even though it will no longer be a national gender machinery, it will now, because we have women, we have youth, we have persons with disabilities. So the machinery, those meetings, when we convene civil society as a whole, will also be looking at all those. So it will not just be a national gender machinery, but women, youth, and persons with disabilities machinery. It will look at gender-based violence and other things. I think it's important because as a department, I don't think we need to consult with civil society only on the NSP. I think we need to work with civil society in all aspects, even looking at economic empowerment of women in rural areas and whatever. We need to work with civil society. Health issues, we need to work with civil society. There are issues now of health where doctors are sterilizing women and whatever. We need to work with civil society in all aspects. So I think that is the other area that I think we need to agree on. The starting point is the National Strategic Plan. However, we need to be able to start working together throughout, because I think the Department of Women, also the way it's structured, it's structured in a way that it should always be the voice of women, youth, and persons with disabilities out there, just like civil society is the voice of women, youth, and persons with disabilities, and those that are affected, victims of violence, and all those things. So we have the same interest, but it's just that maybe because we're located in different places, then we end up looking as if there's conflict among us and whatever. And I don't think there needs to be conflict. We need to be able to work together in order to promote the rights of all those people. And I think also the other thing, before you open for others, I just want to say, as I indicated earlier on, that especially myself, I always play an open hand. I don't come with ulterior motives. I would like to work with civil society, and I hope that all of us will be able to make this work for all of us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just going to go straight to the floor because our time is running out quite quickly.
And
we
also,
have
yeah,
Jackie.
I have to go to another meeting. Yeah.
Okay, we'll just ask for this final question from Jackie the poet. Jackie, please unmute yourself and go ahead and share your question or comment.
Okay. Sorry.
No, not a problem. I've just asked Jackie the poet, who had wanting to, I think, ask a question or share a comment. If you can hear me, please unmute yourself and go ahead and share your comment or question. Okay, I'm not sure if Jackie is able to unmute, but in the meantime, while we wait for them, we just have one other question from the civil society side. Oh, Jackie, are you there?
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it's three things. First of all, the platforms we use to communicate these things to start off with can be problematic. Even me, I use technology quite well, but this one, for example, because I'm always on mobile, it limits the mobile users. So that's why platforms like Zoom are there. They're more interactive. You know who's there. Right now, we don't know who's there. You can't really unmute yourself unless you ask if you're on mobile. And it's limited in many ways. So that also think about the platform to use to communicate. So that point, part two of it, is that, for example, I'm one of the volunteers in that National Strategic Plan for GBVF. In Pillar 1, I'm a co-convener there, leadership, accountability, and coordination. And I can tell you that already there, volunteering with people for whom it's a job, I'm not having any joy. Even now, we are in a meeting with somebody, people have been talking for a time. There's people here in the audience who also have minds and things to say. And now it's like I have another meeting to go to. So you came here to deliver a speech. But that's not communication. I'm a communication specialist. That's not communication. If you don't have time to be in a meeting, don't be in it, or at least take 10 minutes talking and listen the rest of the time. My experience there as a co-convener in Pillar 1, working also with government people, CSO as well, coming from the CSO side, is that our government, this is, I think it was Kwez's voice I had earlier saying, this is too government heavy. And I know sometimes we want to get things done because we're tired of fighting as activists and all that stuff, but we cannot allow this thing to be government heavy and to be told that for Tina, government must select or elect you and then we must speak in one voice. As Kwezi pointed out, at the same time, government does not speak in one voice. This is not the Tower of Babel. There are 7 billion people with 7 billion voices in this planet. And because I experienced especially one disrespect, I was supposed to come and convene a meeting and I said, okay, I'm not here by myself. I'm representing people who don't even have access to data, basic things. We're hearing about billions of rents meant for this, meant for that. We know they're going to be stolen because the thief always steals. So we want to be here to be in the forefront and have people who are actually affected by these things for themselves in their own voices and having access. To start off with, we are discussing here in English. People who are affected, who don't even speak English, who can't even have data, who can't even have smartphones, they're not being consulted. And I'm hearing, we've been consulting all this time online communication spaces, but I'm hearing that on Sunday and Saturday, this thing is going to be in the newspapers. Who reads newspapers? We're not having these meetings in newspapers. So why not put it in the same platforms that you've been communicating in? That's Communications 101. Secondly, I consulted people by email. We sit in these meetings and we talk, and then it's not implemented. We are crying and fighting for CSO representation, and it's noted, but it's not implemented. That's been my biggest fight over there. It's okay, bring people from the ground, so-called the ground, because I think we're all on the ground, but anyways, people from the ground to come and speak in their own voices. They need data to be part of these meetings. You can go get your wonderful auditors and audit those data you send to these women and all manner of people. I sent an email. It took 7 days. I did not even hear back. But when it was time for them to come in to work for them for free, yeah, no, there was time for that. That's disrespect. So that's how the disrespect happens, because you sit in government offices, your air-conditioned offices, with your high-paying jobs or low-paying jobs, and then you are there to take your even in CSOs, by the way, as Kwezi is saying, we are not saints either. There's also all manner of problems because we are human. That's the point. But we can at least respect each other. Even when you say, okay, 51%.
Now.
Yeah, exactly the problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
We do not have people in government who are part of this meeting to tick a box, and for them it's just taking yet another meeting, because that's exactly why there's no implementation of these things. We keep coming. I've been in activist for over 10 years. We've been in many projects with government. We come and we talk, we give our ideas, and they're not implemented. And when it's time, when it hits the fan, then people just come and tick off boxes and put our names there, and it's like we agree with them. Civil society, if there are any members here of civil society, that we don't bow down to government because they disrespect us, even when we volunteer for them for free. We're not finding any joy there. Just want to have this thing quickly. The minister has a speech. This is real. We are not going to be duped by government this time, especially not one that's falling apart and needs to fall apart as a feminist revolution is rising. I'm coming from the Lost Love Rebels Feminist Collective and Equal Healers Collective. Thank you.
I have another meeting.
Thank you so much.
Hello. Lindiwe, can I respond? I have another meeting that I have to attend. Okay. And I would like to, pardon?
Are you going to respond to the last one? There's a couple of questions that relate specifically to the trust. It's about the powers of the trust being registered, the decision to terminate and wind up the trust once it's legal, the process to complete once it's lodged, and also will the trust be subject to tax regulation? So maybe you can answer those quickly. I know that you have to leave us, but we would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, the trust will be subjected to trust laws. They'll have to follow up in terms of when donors are donor funds are received, there are processes, but also it can register and it can be registered as a trust that is exempted from tax. But those processes will be dealt with by the board of the trust. What was the other question? What the powers of the trust? The powers of the trust. The trust is independent from the department, so it will have powers to work with civil society, call government, and call civil society. And the trust can be terminated by the trust or the legislation. The legislation that will be developed can then indicate that the trust that was established to establish the to house the council will be terminated the day the act comes into operation. So the trust can be terminated, or it could adopt the board. The legislation could adopt the board and the secretariat that are in the trust. And then, Lindy, I just want to say something. I think respect goes both ways. Jackie, who's the Jackie, the poet, I think her tone, first of all, was very disrespectful. Yes, I came here because I thought, and I think this is important for me to participate. And I already had other meetings that I had to shift, but other meetings are equally important that I should attend in order for me to be able to ensure that the trust functions well. And the offices that have got air conditions and whatever, I think she can apply for a government job if she wants it. I am not going to allow anybody, as I indicated when I spoke to Kwezi, I respect each and everybody, but I refuse to be disrespected simply because I'm in government. I have been an NGO member also. I am an NGO member, and I have been an advocate practicing out there as an advocate. It doesn't mean that I'm here as a government because I was born as a government official. So I think respect is important for all of us. I have to respect all members of civil society, and I respect them. However, if somebody disrespects me, I refuse. I have another meeting that I have to attend. As indicated when we started, I have Shoki, DDG Shoki, I have Esther Maluleke, who will be able to respond to some of the issues that need to be responded to here. But I request that we all respect each other. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for responding to those comments as well. I think actually our time is about to come to a close. The final question that was asked is that as part of the will traditional leaders form part of the civil society members on the structures? I think that was the final question that we have from our side. Kwezi, I'm also going to request you give us some final points as well. So yeah, if you can just answer that question for us.
Before Kwezi,
and then
before Kwezi, today we had a meeting with the Department of Traditional Affairs, where we are assisting them to mainstream the NSP in their APP and strategy. But also we have agreed in that meeting that we are going to make inputs in their training manual, but also their induction. When new transitional leaders are appointed, they have an induction program that they have. We're going also to mainstream the NSP in there, but also not today. Before we had a meeting with DCOG, the Department of Cooperative Governance, where we are looking at mainstreaming the NSP within the district development model. So that the traditional leaders and all municipalities are involved. I really have to go, and I apologize. I really apologize for leaving you. Not that I don't take you serious. I had indicated even yesterday, I indicated that I had another meeting, but I've moved it because I thought this was important.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think, the registration is the frustration of, of the processes and the frustration of all of us, which I think is also reflected in terms of how, you're working with government. And I think those frustrations will continue to be there until we resolve it. So thank you so much for your time, Kwezi. I don't know if you have anything that you would like to say as Sister has to leave us.
just to thank her for the time and to say we will definitely be in touch. We need, I would still like to engage robustly, and we want to engage robustly about those proposals we made, and us joycing in Zulu, which akazikhulumanga zona, which is, we want to be part of plan, a communications plan, and a process, right? Designing a process of convening to make sure that we really continue the popularizing work and the work to say, so how should we do it, of the multiple voices.
Okay. Now I remember. I didn't respond to that. And when we were saying you want us to tell you how we're communicating, that's why I said, because I was thinking, I'm not sure whether we even have a platform as a department where we are, but I'll find out from our communication unit. But as a department, we are willing to talk to you. We are willing to work together with you. And as I indicated when I started Kwezi,
and to allow yourself to be influenced by us. Yeah?
I let me tell you, I do.
An approach. You must listen to us. Doesn't listen to us. That's getting the problem. And she talked about tone and we want government jobs because they can't listen.
I've worked with civil society and we have achieved a lot. They have influenced me and I've influenced them. So in the process, you'll influence us and we'll influence you. But I agree, we need another process. We need another engagement where I don't have any other meetings after that. So next process, I think Bongile and the team, they will organize another meeting where we can be able to discuss. And I think by the time we discuss, maybe the trust will already be there so that you can be able to influence how it's going to operate and all those things. It's going to be an open process. It's not going to be a closed process. You will influence it, but also you'll continue being able to influence the process of further legislation, of furthering the legislation. Yeah. I am open for discussion. Yeah. No. Thank you very much. And Lindy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry sometimes for losing it. It's just that we have to respect each other. Okay. No, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I think there's a couple of questions that we'll ask. I believe Shoki is there. We're going to ask her those last few questions so that we at least honor all the questions that have been shared with us. And we look forward to connecting with you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, Shoki. I hear that you're on board. There's a couple of questions that were shared that I think would be great for us to get a bit of a resolution on. So I think we have three questions and that have come up, and they are related directly to the interim board. And the question is, what is it that needs to be done with the interim board that can't be done without it? And the second question relates to who are the three people who have been registered, who have been trusted to register the trust, and what is the decision that those three people should be the ones that are registering the trust? So those are the three questions that are coming from the floor. I hope you can hear.
No.
So, am I talking to the Agnes? Okay. I was just trying to find out if we have any more. Joy said that there would be some of her colleagues who remain on the call, but I can't see if there's anyone. There's supposed to be Shoki or Mabatu, I believe, or is it Esther? I'm not sure. But if there's anybody else who's still here who can just highlight some of those questions. I'm going to wait a minute or so to see if there's anybody who is availing themselves to kind of respond. And then if not, we'll have to see how we pick up some of these very important questions. I think what I'm glad about is that this was the first conversation. It'll be first of many. And so whatever we haven't been able to respond to now and here are definitely questions and concerns and comments that we are wanting to take forward into this conversation. As when we started, we said that we're trying to build an engagement, which means it's an ongoing process. So yeah, I'm not hearing anybody from government. Kwezi, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay. I think maybe we should just give some concluding statements at this point, just because I think we're not getting any joy at the moment from the colleagues, the rest of the colleagues. So just as a way to kind of close on, we have a lot of questions that have come up that are specific to, who decide. I think there was so much that happened in that conversation that I felt like we really needed a full day's engagement to really kind of break down and understand the process and understand the decisions and understand how they envision civil society. And even to your point around the ability to convene us as the many voices that, don't necessarily always see eye to eye, but have agreed on addressing GBVF. So I don't know, maybe you want to share your concluding statements, Kwezi. And if anybody from the department is here, they can feel free to, just let us know and maybe respond to some of those questions or any we have additionally. Yeah, so over to you, Kwezi.
I mean, it would be really great. So maybe they can raise their hands to show that they're here, and they can close off and engage with some of the remaining questions. I think from my side, really, it's to reiterate this need for us to be included in the kind of thinking and working and decision making, because I still do not have an answer I'm satisfied with as to why we are rushing kind of establishing something else, establishing a trust, etc. But maybe if the department does commit to this kind of robust communication strategy and plan, and commit to robust, meaningful engagement with different parts of civil society, commit to, robust convenings to really, think through how we implement the National Strategic Plan together. I think we will continue to invite colleagues to join us in how we can really apply the kinds of pressure and influence and ask some of these critical questions of saying, we know that gender-based violence is a crisis, but building or, having arrangements that are not going to adequately respond to the crisis, going to give this NSP a chance for success. And I think that's where we are coming from. We're not coming from a place of saying we are consistently at battle. I also do think that the state is the state, and there is a vertical relationship between the state and its inhabitants, citizens. And so there's a higher responsibility on government departments in responding to some of these issues and in responding to some of our questions. And so for me, I think it would be really nice if they took a moment to then pause and say, okay, we probably don't need to start an applications process for employment that no one is really clear about at the moment. We're not clear what the people are going to be doing. We're not clear how it's going to be funded. We're not clear what they must do. And for us to get that clarity, we need as much engagement or as many voices as possible. So those are some of the things I would just want to throw out in closing, which is to say, I know that we really want to engage meaningfully. We want to influence the writing of that law and make sure that that law can withstand, other pieces of legislation, that it is harmonious with other pieces of legislation, that it has a kind of, it has some good sections that can allow for the NSP to have a chance. We want to be involved in writing some of these other, I'll just call them committees for now. And we want to, and we will continue, because this is all in part of the work to end gender-based violence in South Africa. This is all part of how we're doing and thinking about ending GBV. No one is kind of claiming and on knowledge, and neither am I claiming, which I'm kind of sad that our judges could not engage the question of some of the things that they need from civil society. I also want to maybe take a moment to kind of honor and recognize some of the anger and some of the rage in the call, to say these are all the emotions that get brought up, when we're trying to build consensus and when we're trying to engage. And so, yeah, I want to hold that. But that for me would be the last thing I'd like to say. Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks so much, Kwez. I see that Shoki's able to join us, maybe to answer some of those last few questions. But just to, I guess, maybe let me not respond to what Kwezi said, and check as a system of questions that we wouldn't want to close without being able to maybe ask and get a response from department side, and then maybe a reflection from your side on behalf of the department, Shoki, around not only just this process, but also there was a question that Kwezi had asked quite early on in the conversation to the advocates around ways in which we could work better, because I think in as much as I think there's frustration and there is rage on both sides possibly, we all agree on one thing. We're agreeing on the process moving forward. How do we do that better? I think it's something that we still want to get back to. And part of asking the different questions is the road to trying to build that. So I'm just going to ask you some of the questions, Shoki, that came through, just the last few questions that were sent. And they are asking specific questions, this interim board, or trust, should I say, the trust that goes along with the board. And the question is, perhaps you could share with us, what is it that needs to be done, that cannot be done without the structure of the board, that is making it imperative for government to want to ensure that it's pushed forward so that we can get an appreciation. And then the second question is, I think the advocate mentioned that there's 3 people who have been designated as the directors. Who are those 3 people? And how was it decided that they should be the ones who are representing government from your side? Yes, I think those are the 2 questions. And then the last question as well is regarding time frames. I think I'm a bit more around that, because I'm not sure. I don't know if they're asking around time frames for the legislative process, which I think we can all appreciate is maybe not so clear, but maybe it's time frames around establishing the board as well, and time frames for the plan that you implement at the moment, so we can also get an appreciation of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Some of the questions, good afternoon to all of you fellow colleagues. I've been battling, I was using my phone and it hasn't been easy. I kept on clicking and raising the hand until I had to come back and log again on the computer, which was also problematic because of connectivity. The issue of what is it that this interim trust has to do that cannot be done. I can't remember what was the question, how it was phrased. But remember, the DG was clear to say, Cabinet resolved that because of the urgency of the matter, set up the council and then deal with the issue of legislation thereafter, considering that it takes long to draft legislation, to take it through all the cabinet and parliamentary processes as well. Now, it can take, she's correct, it can take minimum 3, it can go up to 4 years or so. depending on how it unfolds and all those objection processes that may arise. Nonetheless, the 3 people that have been, whose names are nominated for now, it's for purposes of getting the trust registered. She did say those will be altered as soon as we have the right names nominated by the 6 representatives from the government departments. And once we get the 7 names from civil society, we then go back to the trust, we amend, we put the correct names as agreed upon, and we have the 13 member boards that are registered in the form of the trust deed. So for now, it's just for the purposes of lodging. She did indicate that we wrote letters to the ministers and director generals about the nomination of the members of government to be part of the board. However, we've also noted your concern, which I think is issues that can be resolved when we have our second discussion with her, where you had expressed concern that why is it that only civil society is being assisted in terms of criteria, but not government. So I don't want to get to that one until such time that we have that meeting led by her and we have that meaningful conversation and we reach consensus as to what is our departing point and why we took that route as in terms of nominating the 6 members of government. Then the issue of, I think I've answered all of them. I've answered the 3 people that it will still be amended once we have the final names nominated from government and the final names nominated from civil society. This board for now will continue once we have finalized the establishment of the council itself. It will resume its duty in line with what is in the NSP as outlined in the NSP itself about the roles and responsibilities of the council. So for now, we are just wanting to formalize the structure and make sure that it does have that legal status that we desire. But the sooner we conclude on our nomination processes, both sides, the better, so that this council that we are putting in place until such time that legislation dictates otherwise, there is nothing that's going to stop us 2 or 3 years down the line to go back to the drawing board and then say, now we've finalized the legislation and these are the dictates of the legislation, and we re-look at the council that shall have been put in place as of now until at the point where we say we are now informed by this legislation to come up with the structure. But to fold our hands and say there's no legislation, therefore there can be no interim structure or whatever structure you want to call it, and therefore we cannot implement, I don't think it's going to assist us. It is in that light that we thought, let's engage, let's talk, and give you our perspective why we would like to put this measure in place for now until such time that the legislation is concluded, which we will be prioritizing, of course, once the council is on board. And once we come up with that legislation and it's endorsed, that legislation will inform the kind of structure that we all envisage. Thanks.
Thank you so much for responding to those questions. I think what's clearer than ever, the more we're having this conversation, is that we need so much more time to engage. We need a lot more time to get to an appreciation of both sides of the equation, and also the best way to move forward without leaving anybody else behind. And so I think, with that, there's no other questions that we have from the floor or from any of the other social platforms at the moment. So if there's nothing else, Kwezi, I don't know if you have any follow-ups to what Mrs. Shoki has just said in response to the questions around and the decisions around that, as well as the justification or the explanation and understanding around why the structure is being put forward. Kwezi, do you have any last few questions or comments in that direction?
No, I don't, Lynn. Thank you. I think I'm fine for now, just with the understanding that we're going to keep asking and keep needing some of these a lot of the justifications, and we really would like that our recommendations be taken on and to be brought closer into the picture as the many voices that we are, you know, and to see a very clear and detailed implementation plan for how the legislation is going to get passed, and all of the and everything else that I said. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Sishoki, and to the department and the DVG for joining us today. I think it's been a fruitful conversation, but like Kwezi said, hopefully the one of many yet to come, until we are all on the same page. I don't know if there's anything else in closing before I close us out.
Well, we're looking forward to this partnership. It may not be an easy road, but we can walk this path together. And we pledge our commitment. We will take it forward again collectively until that we serve South Africa, all of us in one spirit, in unison, and nothing is impossible. My theme is pulling together. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much. We will definitely hold you to that and holding each other accountable parts as we go on this road. Thank you so much again for joining us today. And thanks as well to Kwezi for your input, as well as myself. I just want to share with everyone that we're going to follow up with a Google form that just asks us how you would like to be engaged and how we can continue to engage you further, and as well as how we can share any information that we receive around the NSP process and all that we've discussed in the 12 weeks that we've been together. So please go ahead and fill in that Google Doc that will allow us to have ways of reaching you and contacting you and staying in touch as we continue this journey. Even though we've come to the close of the 12 weeks, it's not the end of this conversation. If anything, I think it's only the beginning. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for all the people who are with us on the webinars, on the GoToWebinar, on the different platforms, and the colleagues who have been behind the scenes throughout these 12 weeks. And well done to everyone as well. Thank you so much. And everyone have a great afternoon further. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.